Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world of courtship so complex, so subtle, and so deeply awkward. It makes our modern dating anxieties look like a walk in the park. Forget swiping right on a profile picture. Tonight, we're swiping right on a poem. We are heading back 1,000 years to Heian-era Japan, to the imperial court in what is now Kyoto. It was a place of exquisite beauty, refined taste, and a set of romantic rules so strict that the person you were trying to impress, you might never actually see their face. Seriously, your 21st century dating advice would get you laughed, very politely, out of the palace. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop me a comment down below. Tell me what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always kind of magical to see where all these stories are landing. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is one of dim, filtered light and soft, rustling sounds. You are a courtier in the palace of Heian-era, the capital of peace and tranquility. Your days are a slow, meandering river of beautiful, poetic boredom. You live in a series of interconnected wooden pavilions with polished cedar floors and sliding paper screens instead of solid walls. The air is always thick with the scent of burning incense, a carefully chosen blend of sandalwood and cloves that signals your family has good taste. Your life is a performance of aesthetics. Everything you do, from the way you hold a fan to the color of your robes, is a statement, but it is a silent statement, made in a world that is profoundly quiet. The loudest sounds are the rustle of silk as someone passes, the distant, mournful notes of a flute being practiced in another wing of the palace, or the gentle thud of a screen being closed. You are a young man of respectable but not magnificent rank. Your job, when you have one, consists of copying out imperial edicts in your finest calligraphy or attending long, slow ceremonies where very little actually happens. Most of your time, however, is your own, and you spend it in a state of refined listlessness, composing poetry, playing board games like Go, or simply staring at the way the moonlight falls on the moss in the garden. This cultivated sense of melancholy, this appreciation for the gentle sadness of things, known as mono no aware, is the highest form of emotional expression. To be loudly cheerful is to be vulgar. To be beautifully sad is to be a true connoisseur of life. But there is a problem. You are young, and you are interested in romance. The palace is filled with ladies in waiting, the daughters of high-ranking nobles. They are beautiful, witty, and accomplished. Then they are completely, utterly invisible. The men's quarters and the women's quarters are strictly segregated. A respectable lady of the court spends her entire life hidden from the view of men. She lives behind a series of screens, folding screens by OBU painted with beautiful landscapes, and, most importantly, portable screens of state Kicho and bamboo blinds SUD that are always placed between her and any visitor. Even her own father or brothers might only speak to her through a screen. You will never just bump into a girl in the hallway. Her face is a secret, a treasure to be guarded. So how can you possibly fall in love? You must fall in love with the things you can perceive. Her poetry, her handwriting, the music she plays on her koto, and, most tantalizingly, the layered sleeves of her kimono. The lady might, if she is so inclined, allow the edges of her sleeves, 12 layers of exquisitely matched, colored silks, to be visible just beneath her bamboo blind as a man is passing. The combination of colors, chosen to reflect the season and a particular poetic sentiment, is a complete statement of her taste, her sensitivity, and her soul. You can fall madly in love with a sleeve. A quirky and fascinating detail of this is what you wouldn't see, even if you did get a glimpse of her face. Most aristocratic women of this era practice stoegoro, the custom of blackening their teeth. They would paint their teeth daily with a dark, lacquer-like substance. To a modern eye, it seems strange, but to the Heian courtier, a set of gleaming white teeth was considered garish and animalistic. Blackened teeth were a mark of beauty and civilization. They also shaved off their eyebrows and drew new, smudgy ones high on their foreheads. The face you are so desperate to see is one that would look completely alien to you. The great academic debate here concerns the reality of this system. Our primary sources for the customs of the Heian court come from the literature of the time, much of it written by women like Murasaki Shikibu, author of the tale of Genji. The question is, was this literature an accurate documentary of daily life, or was it a romanticized ideal? Did people really adhere to these incredibly strict rules of invisibility all the time? Some historians argue that yes, this was the reality for the upper echelons of the court. Others suggest the literature represents a best behavior ideal. Than that in reality, there was likely more sneaking around, more illicit glimpses, and more rule-bending than the official stories would have us believe. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, a constant tension between the rigid ideal and messy human reality. But for you, sitting in your quiet room, the rules are very real. You are bored, you are lonely, and you are surrounded by invisible, brilliant women. And then one day, a friend mentions a lady in the western wing of the palace. He hasn't seen her, of course, but he has heard a rumor about the unmatched elegance of her taste, her skill in poetry, and the breathtaking beauty of her kimono sleeves. And in your world of beautiful boredom, that rumor is enough to start a fire. The rumor of this lady, whose name you don't even know, takes root in your mind. You begin to orchestrate your day so that your aimless wanderings might take you past the western wing of the palace. You walk slowly, your fan held just so, feigning a deep contemplation of the garden. But all your senses are strained, hoping for some clue, some sign of the woman who lives behind those silent, latticed walls. You are hoping, specifically, for a glimpse of a sleeve. It sounds absurd, but in your world, the sleeve is everything. They court ladies' formal attire. The Juni Haito or 12-layered robe is a masterpiece of textile art. It consists of multiple layers of unlined silk robes, each one a different color. The genius of the outfit is in the way these colors are combined and how they appear at the openings, at the neck, and, most importantly, at the cuffs of the long, flowing sleeves. The specific combination of colors, known as Kisani no Iron, is not random. It is a complex code, a poem written in silk. Each color combination has a name and is strictly associated with a particular season, a plant, or even a specific mood. In spring, a lady might wear a combination called plum blossom of the underside, with layers of crimson and purple over a base of green, mimicking the way a plum blossom looks. In autumn, she might choose maple leaf, a stunning gradient of yellows, oranges, and deep reds. To wear a spring combination in autumn would be a horrifying mistake, a sign of a dull, insensitive soul. Your friend's rumor was not just that this lady was beautiful or witty, but that her sense of kasani was a thing of wonder, that she could create combinations of colors so subtle, so evocative, so perfectly in tune with the precise feeling of that particular day, that it left other, less tasteful ladies looking clumsy and garish. You are in love with a rumor of her aesthetic judgment, and so you wait, and you watch. And one afternoon, as you are passing her pavilion, you said, "A bamboo blind has been lifted just a few inches from the bottom, perhaps to allow a breeze to enter, and beneath it, resting on the polished veranda, as if by accident, is the edge of a set of sleeves. You freeze. You pretend to be adjusting the knot of your sash, but your eyes are devouring the sight. The colors are breathtaking. It is early summer, the season of the iris. The outer layer is a deep, vibrant violet, the next a pale lavender, then a pristine white, another layer of a different violet, then finally, at the very bottom, a flash of brilliant, grassy green. It is the iris combination, but it is done with a perfection you have never seen. The shades are so perfectly matched, the gradient so subtle. It speaks of a deep, almost painful sensitivity to the beauty of the natural world. It is a masterpiece. Your heart pounds. The owner of that sleeve must be a goddess. This focus on textiles and colors is a defining feature of Heian court life. It was a society obsessed with surfaces, with the idea that a person's inner worth was directly expressed by their outer appearance. But this was not about fashion in the modern sense of changing trends. It was about a deep, shared cultural vocabulary of beauty. Everyone at court knew the names and meanings of the color combinations. A lady's choice of sleeve was a public declaration of her taste and education. It was her resume, her profile picture, and her opening line all rolled into one. A curious detail that modern textile historians have uncovered is the incredible science behind these colors. The dyes were all derived from natural sources: plants, flowers, and even insects. Achieving the precise, subtle shades required for these combinations was a difficult and expensive process. The safflower red, for instance, was notoriously difficult to produce and would fade quickly, meaning that a robe of that color was a symbol of immense wealth and status. The ability to assemble a perfect Kasani no robe was not just a matter of taste. It was a matter of resources. The academic debate here is about gender. Was this intense focus on clothing a way of objectifying women, reducing them to decorative surfaces, or was it one of the few arenas where a woman, confined and hidden from the world, could exercise real power and creativity? Some scholars argue the latter. They contend that while a man's worth was judged by his rank and his skill in politics or poetry, a woman's primary canvas for self-expression was her clothing. It was a field where she could be an artist, a scholar, a connoisseur. A woman like the one whose sleeve you have just seen could build a fearsome reputation and gain immense social capital based entirely on her impeccable taste. It was her weapon in the silent, aesthetic warfare of the court. You finally pull your eyes away from the sleeve before you arouse suspicion. You look on, but the world seems different now. The image of those 5 layers of silk, violet, lavender, white, violet, green, is burned into your mind. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. You are no longer just intrigued. You are hopelessly, completely smitten, and you know, with a terrifying certainty, that you must now do something about it. You must write a poem. The vision of the iris-colored sleeves has hijacked your every waking thought. The desire to know the woman who wears them has become a beautiful, aching obsession. But you cannot simply walk up to her quarters and introduce yourself. That would be an act of shocking, unforgivable vulgarity. Your only path forward is through art, before you can write a poem. However, you find another, less direct way to court her. You begin to linger in the corridors near her pavilion, not just to catch another glimpse of a sleeve, but to listen. Her chambers, like yours, are constructed of wooden paper. Sound travels, and the most beautiful sound you can imagine begins to drift through the screens. The music of her koto. The koto is a long, stringed instrument, a type of zither, that is laid on the floor and plucked. In the hands of a master, its sound is complex and deeply evocative, capable of expressing the most subtle shades of emotion. To play the koto well is one of the essential accomplishments of a court lady. It is a sign of her refinement, her discipline, and her sensitivity. You find a secluded spot in a nearby garden, a place where you can sit behind a large stone lantern and be reasonably sure you won't be seen. And you just listen. Every afternoon, at around the same time, she plays. You cannot see her, of course. You can only imagine her, a graceful figure kneeling on the tatami mats, her long, silken sleeves artfully arranged around her, her fingers moving with precision and grace over the 13 strings of the instrument. The music she plays becomes the soundtrack to your daydreams. Some days she plays classical Chinese melodies, the sign of her excellent, formal education. The music is complex, ordered, and beautiful, but it is the music of the mind. On other days, she plays folk songs, simpler tunes imbued with a sense of longing and melancholy. This tells you that she has a connection to the world outside the court, a populist touch that you find intriguing. But it is on the days when she plays her own compositions that you truly fall in love. The music is unlike anything you have ever heard. It is unpredictable, emotional, and deeply personal. It seems to tell a story. You can hear the sound of rainfall in a flurry of high notes, the sadness of a solitary evening in a slow, lingering melody, the sudden joy of a blossoming flower in a rising chord. Her music is a direct window into her soul, a soul that is clearly passionate, intelligent, and breathtakingly creative. This practice of eavesdropping was a common and accepted part of Heian courtship. In the tale of Genji, the hero, Prince Genji, frequently falls in love with women after secretly listening to them play music or converse with their attendants. It was considered a legitimate way to gather information about a lady's character. Her choice of music, her skill as a player, and even the tone of her voice in conversation were all crucial data points for a prospective suitor. Take quirky detail about Heian music is the importance of ma, the concept of silence or negative space. A good musician knew that the silence between the notes was just as important as the notes themselves. It was in these pauses that the true emotion of the piece could be felt. The lady's playing is full of these exquisite, heart-stopping silences. It tells you that she is a woman of profound subtlety. The historical debate here concerns the musical abilities of the average courtier. The literature of the period is filled with characters who are all brilliant musicians, dashing off flawless compositions at a moment's notice. Was this the reality, or was it an idealized depiction? Musicologists who study the period argue that while musical accomplishment was highly valued, it is likely that, as in any society, talent was unevenly distributed. For every genius composer like the lady in the Western Wing, there were probably a dozen less talented individuals who struggled through their daily practice. The literature likely reflects the A-list of the court's musical scene, not the everyday reality for everyone. The pressure to be musically accomplished, however, was very real for all. You continue your daily vigil, hiding behind your stone lantern. You have now collected several vital pieces of information about your intended. You know she has impeccable taste in sleeves. You know she is a musical genius. You know her soul is as beautiful and complex as the melodies she plays. You have constructed an entire person in your mind, a perfect being made of color, sound, and your own longing. The evidence is overwhelming. You are in love. No, you have no choice. The fear is immense, but the desire is greater. You must finally pick up your brush and write. The decision is made. The time for passive admiration is over. You must now take the first, terrifying step in this delicate dance of courtship. You must compose a poem. This is not a casual, thinking of you kind of message. This first poem is your formal application for the position of a potential romantic interest. It will be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged with a rigor that would make a modern literary critic blush. Everything depends on these few lines. You retreat to your chambers. You dismiss your attendants, seeking absolute solitude. The pressure is immense. Your poem must be perfect. It must be a walker. The classical 5-line form with a strict 5-7-5-7-7-7 syllable structure. This structure is rigid, but within it, you must express a world of feeling. Your poem cannot be too direct. To say, "I saw your sleeves and I think you are wonderful," would be laughably crude. You must be elusive, indirect, and subtle. You must use imagery from nature that reflects both the season and the specific emotion you are trying to convey. It is early summer. You saw her iris sleeves. The theme is clear. You must write a poem about irises. You sit before a low writing desk, a blank piece of paper before you. The paper itself is a source of anxiety, but we'll get to that later. For now, you just focus on the words. You begin to compose, your mind a flurry of images and syllabic counts. How can I not think of you, when the iris in the marsh displays its purple heart for all the world to see, yet your beauty remains concealed? You read it over. Is it too bold? Is the reference to her concealed beauty too forward? Perhaps. You crumple up the paper and toss it aside. You will go through a dozen such drafts. The process is agonizing. Every word is weighed, every image considered. You must show off your knowledge of classic poetry by alluding to a famous poem of the past, but you must also demonstrate your own originality. You must be emotional, but not overly passionate. You must be clever, but not pedantic. It is a balancing act of breathtaking difficulty. This poetic obsession was the absolute heart of Heian court culture. Literacy and poetic skill were not just desirable traits. They were the fundamental markers of a person's worth. Your ability to compose a sophisticated, allusive poem at a moment's notice was the primary way you demonstrated your intelligence, your sensitivity, and your good breeding. The court was a constant, ongoing poetry slam. People from the emperor down to the lowest-ranking courtier were expected to be able to dash off a decent waka. The first poem in a courtship was known as the cake goi, or first call. It was a speculative venture, a poetic shot in the dark. You were sending it to a woman you had never met, and you were doing so based on the flimsiest of evidence. A rumor, a sleeve, a strain of music. The poem had to do all the work of a first impression. A curious detail about this poetic culture is the prevalence of pillow words emokura kotoba. These were stock, 5-syllable phrases that were conventionally used to modify certain nouns. For example, the phrase as high hiki no foot dragging was a standard pillow word for mountains. These were part of the shared poetic vocabulary that every educated person knew. Using a pillow word correctly was a sign of your good education, but relying on them too heavily could be seen as a sign of a lack of originality. It was yet another subtle test. The academic debate here is about the spontaneity of this poetry. The literature of the era, like the pillow book of SCI shown at GON, gives the impression that courtiers could produce brilliant, perfect poems on the spot, in response to any situation. Was this real, or was it a literary convention? Some scholars argue that it's likely many people had a stockpile of pre-written poems ready to go for common occasions. They might have a few good morning after poems, a few decent first-time seeing snow poems, and so on, which they could then adapt to the specific situation. This suggests that the process might have been less about spontaneous creation and more about clever and timely deployment of existing material. Other historians contend that we shouldn't underestimate the degree to which these people were immersed in poetry. From a young age, they studied the classic anthologies and participated in poetry contests. For them, thinking in a 5-7-5-7-7-7 syllable structure might have been as natural as us thinking in prose. The ability to compose on the spot, they argue, was a genuine and highly practiced skill. After hours of work, you finally have a version you are satisfied with. It is still about the iris, but it is more subtle, more melancholic. It hints at your feelings without stating them outright, and it contains a clever, slightly obscure allusion to an old Chinese love poem that a truly educated woman would surely appreciate. It is, you believe, a masterpiece. It is a reflection of your very soul. Now comes the next agonizing stage, preparing the physical letter. Because in this world, the presentation is just as important as the poem itself. You have the words, 31 syllables of pure, distilled longing and intellectual brilliance, but the poem itself is only half the battle. Now, you must present it. The physical object of the letter is a message in itself, a testament to your taste and refinement. A brilliant poem delivered in a clumsy, thoughtless manner is worse than no poem at all. It is an insult. First, you must choose the paper. You do not simply grab a blank sheet. You have a collection of exquisite, handmade papers, each one subtly different in texture, weight, and color. The choice is critical and must reflect the mood of the poem and the season. Since your poem is about the summer iris, a heavy, dark winter paper would be a disaster. You need something light, ethereal. You consider a thin, almost translucent white paper. Simple, elegant, but perhaps too plain. You then look at a pale green paper, the color of new leaves. This is better. It complements the theme of the iris. But then you find the perfect sheet. It is a very pale, almost white mulberry paper, but it has been subtly dyed on the reverse side with a hint of violet. When held up to the light, it has a faint, ghostly purple glow. It is beautiful, unexpected, and perfectly in tune with the subject of your poem. It whispers iris without shouting it. Next, the ink. You must grind your own ink from an inkstone. The quality of the ink, Its darkness and its fragrance are all part of the message. You take your time, adding a few drops of water to the stone and grinding the ink stick in slow, meditative circles until you have a pool of deep, lustrous black ink. Now, the calligraphy. This is perhaps the most crucial element of all. Your handwriting is considered a direct, unfiltered reflection of your soul. A man with rough, clumsy handwriting is assumed to be a rough, clumsy person. A man with elegant, flowing calligraphy is clearly a person of grace, sensitivity, and good breeding. You take your finest brush, dip it in the ink, and with a deep, calming breath, you begin to write. Every stroke is deliberate. The pressure of the brush, the flow of the ink, the spacing of the characters, it all combines to create a visual work of art. You write in the grass script style, a cursive, flowing script that is considered more personal and emotional than the formal block script. Once the poem is written, you must fold it. You do not simply fold it in half and stick it in an envelope. There are prescribed, intricate ways to fold a letter, and the style of the fold depends on the occasion. For a formal letter, a simple, long fold might be appropriate, but for a love poem, a more complex, nut-like fold is required. The way the letter is folded is a sign of your respect and the seriousness of your intentions. The final, and most invisible, touch is the perfume. You must scent the letter. You do this by holding the folded paper over the smoke of your personal blend of incense. Every courtier has his own signature scent, a unique combination of aromatic woods and spices that he has spent years perfecting. This scent will linger on the paper, a ghostly, intimate calling card. When the lady receives your letter, the first thing she will experience, even before she has unfolded it, is your personal fragrance. It is a way of sending a piece of your physical presence, a hint of your very essence, into her hidden world. A curious and extreme example of this aesthetic obsession is found in the tale of Genji, where a character sends a letter written on a brilliant crimson paper. This is considered a shocking, almost offensively passionate gesture. The choice of such a bold color is a dramatic and risky statement. Your own choice of pale, violet-tinged paper is far more in keeping with the subtle, understated elegance that the court values. The historical debate here concerns the literacy of this system. Was this complex web of non-verbal cues, paper, ink, scent, calligraphy, a genuine language, understood by all, or was it a more fluid and subjective system, open to individual interpretation? Some historians argue that it was a highly codified system, a visual grammar that every courtier learned. They contend that the meaning of a particular paper color or folding style was as fixed and as clear as the meaning of a word. Other scholars argue that while there were certainly conventions, there was also a great deal of room for personal expression and interpretation. They suggest that the meaning of a letter was a combination of the shared cultural codes and the individual, artistic choices of the sender. The beauty of the system was that it allowed for both conformity and creativity. It was a language, but a poetic one, where a single gesture could have multiple layers of meaning. Your letter is now complete. It is a perfect, multi-sensory object. The poem speaks to her mind. The calligraphy speaks to her soul. The paper and the perfume speak to her senses. It is the best first impression you are capable of making. You have poured all of your taste, all of your education, all of your longing into this one. Fragile object. Now comes the hard part. You have to send it. The poem is a perfect object, a distillation of your soul, but it is also a fragile, useless thing until it is properly presented. The final touch, the one that will elevate your letter from a mere piece of paper to a true work of art, is the flower. You must attach a fresh, living flower or a sprig from a blossoming tree to the folded letter. This is not a decorative afterthought. It is a vital part of the poetic message, an actual, tangible symbol that anchors the abstract emotions of your poem to the real, living world. And, like every other choice you have made, the choice of flower is freighted with immense significance. It is early summer, and your poem is about the iris. The obvious choice would be to attach an iris blossom, but this might be seen as too literal, too heavy-handed. A man of true subtlety might choose something more elusive. You wander into the garden attached to your family's quarters, a space of carefully raked gravel, moss-covered rocks, and meticulously pruned trees. Your eyes scan the foliage, searching for the perfect botanical messenger. You consider a sprig of wisteria. Its long, drooping purple blossoms are beautiful and in season, and the color echoes the Irish theme. But wisteria has its own complex poetic associations, often linked to themes of memory in the past. This is not quite the message you want to send. You want to speak of a present, vibrant feeling. Then you see it. A carrier bush, its branches covered in a riot of bright yellow, rose-like flowers. In the language of the court, the yellow carrier rose Yamabuki is often associated with youthful passion and elegance. But, more importantly, it is famous for a historical and poetic reason. There is a well-known story of a young nobleman who was embarrassed when a lady sent him a carrier branch, and he could not immediately recall the classic poem associated with it. Since then, the carrier has become a symbol of heightened aesthetic sensitivity and a subtle test of one's literary knowledge. To send a carrier is to say, I am a man of deep feeling, but also of deep learning. Do you understand my reference? It is a confident, slightly risky gesture. You carefully snip a perfect sprig, one with a single, half-open blossom and a few delicate green leaves. Using a fine, silk cord, you tie the sprig to your intricately folded letter. The contrast between the brilliant yellow of the flower and the pale violet of the paper is visually stunning. The message is now complete. It is a symphony of words, calligraphy, deeper, scent, and nature. This use of natural elements was central to the Heian aesthetic. The courtiers lived in a state of constant, heightened awareness of the changing seasons. Their lives were governed by the natural calendar. The first cherry blossoms, the cry of the first cicada, the turning of the first maple leaf. These were all events of immense importance, to be noted, celebrated, and incorporated into their art. A person who was out of tune with the season, who failed to notice the subtle changes in the world around them, was considered a dull and uninteresting person. Your letter is proof that you are paying attention. A curious detail of this practice is its ephemeral nature. A fresh flower will wilt. This was part of the point. The beauty of the gesture was fleeting. Just like the emotion it was meant to convey, the recipient had to see it and appreciate it in its moment of perfect, transient beauty. It was a physical manifestation of the Buddhist concept of mono no aware, the gentle sadness of the impermanence of all things. Your letter is not meant to be a permanent document. It is a momentary, beautiful experience. The academic debate here concerns the sincerity of these gestures. Were these complex, multi-layered messages a genuine expression of a person's feelings, or were they a kind of elaborate, competitive game, a form of aesthetic chess where the goal was to outmaneuver your opponent with a more clever reference or a more beautiful flower? Some historians argue that the system was so highly formalized that it left little room for genuine emotion. They suggest that a courtier like you was not expressing his own unique feelings, but was skillfully deploying a set of pre-existing cultural symbols to achieve a desired social outcome. In this case, winning the lady's affection. In this view, the process is more about performance than passion. Other historians, however, argue that this is a false dichotomy. They contend that for the Heian courtier, deep emotion could only be expressed through this formal, aesthetic language. The structure was not a cage. It was the vessel that gave shape and meaning to their feelings. To them, a beautifully chosen flower was not a game. It was the most sincere and powerful way to say I love you. The artistry and the emotion were one and the same. You hold the finished object in your hand. It is, you feel, the most perfect thing you have ever made. It is a piece of your soul, given form in paper, ink, and petals. It is a terrifyingly vulnerable and hopeful thing. No, all that is left is to send it on its way, to release this small, beautiful bird into the world and to pray that it finds its destination without being torn apart by the hawks of criticism. The beautiful, fragile message is complete. It sits on your writing desk, a perfect little jewel of poetry and aesthetics. But it cannot deliver itself. You now face the final, and in some ways most humbling, part of the process. You must entrust your heart, your reputation, and your artistic soul to a low-ranking servant. You cannot deliver the letter yourself. To be seen lurking near the women's quarters would be a scandalous breach of protocol. You cannot use one of your own high-ranking personal attendants, as that would be too obvious and would risk gossip. You must find a suitable, discreet, and reliable intermediary. This is a job for a page boy, a young apprentice courtier, or perhaps one of the junior guards who patrols the palace corridors. These are the go-betweens of the Heian court, the invisible conduits through whom almost all romantic correspondence flows. They are low-status individuals, often overlooked by the high-ranking nobles, and this very invisibility makes them the perfect messengers. You summon a young page boy you know to be reasonably intelligent and, more importantly, discreet. He is a boy of about 14, the son of a minor provincial official, hoping to make his way in the capital. He enters your chambers and bows low, his eyes fixed on the floor. He is terrified of you, which is a good start. You pick up your precious letter. Holding it out to him feels like handing over your own child to a stranger. You give him his instructions in a low, serious voice. This is for the lady in the western pavilion, the one served by the attendant known as Chuzhou. You will give this to Chuzhou directly, to no one else. Do you understand? Yes, my lord, the boy whispers, his eyes wide. There may be other gentlemen interested in this lady. You continue, the words tasting like ash in your mouth. You will not speak to them. You will not be distracted. Your loyalty is to me. If you are successful and discreet, you will be rewarded. If you fail, you let the threat hang in the air. Unspoken but perfectly understood. The boy nods, swallows hard, and takes the letter from you. He holds it with both hands, as if it were a sacred relic. He bows again and backs out of the room, disappearing as silently as he arrived. And now, your fate is entirely out of your hands. You have launched your ship, and it is now at the mercy of the vast, unpredictable ocean of the palace's servant network. The potential for disaster is enormous. The boy could be lazy and simply lose the letter. He could be clumsy and drop it in a puddle, ruining the delicate paper and the calligraphy. He could be bribed by a rival, who might pay him to deliver the letter to the wrong person, or to simply throw away. He could even open it himself, read your beautiful, heartfelt poem with his semi-literate eyes, and show it to his friends for a good laugh. The thought is a physical pain. This reliance on low-status intermediaries is a fascinating aspect of the high-end social structure. The great nobles, for all their power and prestige, were completely dependent on the lower classes to conduct the most intimate and important business of their lives. This created a strange, inverted power dynamic. I, humble page boy, for a brief moment, held the entire romantic future of a high-ranking courtier in his hands. A telling detail from the literature of the time is how often these messengers are characterized. They are frequently portrayed as either comically inept, leading to disastrous misunderstandings, or as shrewd and opportunistic, playing rival suitors against each other to maximize their own rewards. They are the agents of chaos and comedy in a world that is otherwise obsessed with order and decorum. The academic debate here is about the reliability of this system. Given the high potential for error and betrayal, how did anyone's letters ever reach their intended destination? One school of thought argues that the system was probably less chaotic than the literature suggests. They believe that strong bonds of loyalty, reinforced by the promise of reward and the threat of severe punishment, would have ensured that most messengers were reliable. A good messenger could make a career out of being discreet and efficient, earning a reputation that would bring them more business and higher rewards. Another perspective suggests that the unreliability of the system was actually part of the game. It added an element of chance and danger to the courtship process, making it more exciting. The possibility that your poem might go astray or be intercepted by a rival was a risk you had to take. Overcoming these obstacles, successfully navigating the treacherous network of messengers and gatekeepers, was part of the proof of your devotion and skill as a suitor. You sit in your room, the minutes stretching into an eternity. You try to read, you try to practice your flute, but you can't focus. Your mind is following the page boy on his journey through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. You see him dodging guards, avoiding senior courtiers, searching for the face of the attendant named Chuzhou. Your entire future is in the hands of a 14-year-old boy you barely know. All you can do now is wait, and the waiting is the purest form of torture. The letter is gone. Your small, perfect vessel of hope has been sent out into the world, and now you are left with nothing but a profound, gut-wrenching silence. The period of waiting begins, and it is an agony unlike any other. Every minute that passes is a new form of torture. Every rustle of a screen a potential, and ultimately disappointing sign of a reply. You tell yourself not to be impatient. A lady of her stature and refinement would not reply immediately. That would be unseemly. A sign of overeagerness. She must take her time. She must first appreciate the beauty of your letter as a physical object. She must read the poem, consider its allusions, and savor its sentiment. Then, she must compose her own response, a process that is just as fraught and time-consuming as your own was. To expect a quick reply is to be a vulgar, impatient man. You know all this, but the knowledge does nothing to soothe the frantic anxiety in your heart. A day passes, then another. The silence from the western pavilion is deafening. You begin to spiral into a vortex of self-doubt and despair. What went wrong? Was the messenger intercepted? Did he deliver it to the wrong person? Or, the most horrifying thought of all, did the letter arrive safely? And was it judged to be unworthy? You replay every decision you made in a frantic, obsessive loop. Was the violet-tinged paper too pretentious? Was the calligraphy a little shaky on the final character? Was the allusion in the poem too obscure? Or, even worse, was it too obvious? You remember the yellow carrier flower you attached. A confident, risky move. Perhaps it was too risky. Perhaps she thought you were arrogant, a pedant showing off his literary knowledge. The beautiful object you were so proud of now seems like a parade of amateurish, clumsy mistakes. In the world of Heian courtship, silence is an answer, and it is the cruelest answer of all. A lady who receives a poem from a man she deems unworthy, a man of low rank, of poor taste, or of boorish poetic skill, will not send back a polite no, thank you. She will simply send back nothing. The lack of a reply is a quiet, devastatingly effective rejection. It is a social snub of the highest order, a ghosting so profound it could tarnish a man's reputation. Word would get around. Did you hear about Lord Akinori? He sent a poem to the lady in the West Wing, and she did not even deign to reply. It is a source of deep, public shame. This practice of using silence as a social tool is a key feature of the Heian court's communication style. It is a culture that values indirectness above all else. A direct no is considered confrontational and tasteless. A silent, polite void is a much more elegant, and much more cutting, way to convey the same message. A curious detail of this waiting game is the role of the seasons. If you send a poem and the season changes before you receive a reply, your chances are considered to be almost zero. For example, if you send a poem about the cherry blossoms at the very end of spring, and you don't hear back before the first signs of summer appear, it's over. The moment is past. The aesthetic context of your poem has expired. To reply to a cherry blossom poem when the cherry blossoms are all gone would be tasteless. The affair is dead before it even began. The historical debate here is about the emotional toll of this system. Was this constant, low-level anxiety and the ever-present threat of public humiliation psychologically damaging? Some historians, looking at it through a modern lens, argue that it must have been. They see a system that was almost designed to create insecurity, self-doubt, and social paranoia. The pressure to be constantly on, to perform one's taste and sensitivity flawlessly, must have been exhausting. Other historians, however, suggest that the courtiers of this era were simply built differently. They were raised from birth in this highly competitive, highly aestheticized world. They were trained to endure these periods of uncertainty with a kind of stoic, melancholy grace, the feeling of anxious waiting. The mono, no aware of a love that might never be, was not necessarily a negative emotion. It was a deep, poignant, and beautiful feeling in itself, something to be savored and turned into yet another poem. They argue that we should not mistake their poetic sadness for genuine depression. The angst was part of the art. You are lying on your sleeping mat, staring at the ceiling, when you hear a soft scratching sound at your screen. Your heart leaps into your throat. It is the page boy, returned from his mission. He enters, bows low, and holds out a small, folded piece of paper. It is not your letter, returned and opened. It is something new. It is a reply. It is smaller than your own letter, folded with an almost impossible delicacy. It is made of a deep, lustrous purple paper, the color of a late summer morning glory. And tied to it, with a single strand of silver thread, is a sprig of the same flower. She has replied. The silence is broken. You have not been rejected. Your heart soars, with a relief so intense it almost feels like pain. The page boy places the small, purple letter in your hands and retreats, leaving you alone with the object of all your hopes and fears. For a moment, you just hold it. It feels impossibly light, yet it carries the weight of your entire future. The scent from the paper, a subtle and unfamiliar blend of rare incense, reaches you. It is her scent, the first, most intimate clue to her physical presence. With trembling fingers, you untie the silver thread and gently remove the sprig of morning glory. The flower is a message in itself. The morning glory, which blooms in the morning and fades by the afternoon, is a classic symbol of transient beauty and the poignant brevity of an encounter. It is a perfect, poetic response to the theme of fleetingness you introduced with your wilting Carrier flower. She is playing your game, and she is playing it at a very high level. Finally, you unfold the letter. The paper is even more beautiful than you first thought. A deep, rich purple that speaks of high rank and exquisite taste. And on it, written in a fine, elegant hand, is her reply. It is another waka, a counter-poem, a response to your own. You read it, your heart pounding, your iris-hued sleeves. They so from afar. You say, perhaps it was just a reflection of the bloom already in your own heart. It is a masterpiece of the form. It is a rejection, a query, and an invitation, all in one. On the surface, she is politely deflecting your compliment. You think you saw my beautiful sleeves. Perhaps you were just projecting your own poetic feelings onto an ordinary sight. It is a display of exquisite modesty, a refusal to accept your praise directly. But beneath that surface, it is so much more. By mentioning the iris, she is acknowledging your poem's central theme. She understood you. By subtly questioning your perception, she is playfully testing your confidence, and by turning the focus back to the bloom in your own heart, she is doing something incredibly clever. She is suggesting that the beauty you see in the world is a reflection of your own poetic soul. It is the highest, most subtle form of compliment one courtier could pay another. She is saying, you are a man of such sensitivity that you see beauty everywhere. She has not said yes. She has not said no. She has said, your move. She has invited you to continue the game. Now begins your own process of critical analysis. You examine her calligraphy with the intensity of a modern art historian. Her handwriting, like yours, is a window to her soul. The strokes are delicate but confident. The characters are perfectly formed but have a certain graceful, flowing energy. It is not a rigid, masculine hand, nor is it a weak, hesitant one. It is a hand that speaks of a powerful intellect and a deeply refined artistic sensibility. You are, if possible, even more in love than you were before. The choice of the deep purple paper, you now realize, is also a subtle power move. While your pale, violet-tinged paper was elegant and understated, her choice is bolder, more regal. It is a quiet reminder of her high rank and her confidence in her own taste. She is not an ingenue to be flattered. She is your aesthetic equal, perhaps even your superior. This exchange of poems was the central mechanism of Heian courtship. It was a long, slow conversation in 31-syllable bursts. It was a way for two people, who could not see or speak to each other, to explore each other's minds, to test each other's wit, and to build a form of intimacy that was based entirely on intellectual and artistic compatibility. A fascinating detail about this poetic dialogue is the importance of speed. While a lady could take her time in replying to a first call poem, once the exchange was underway, a prompt reply was expected. A poem received in the morning should be answered by the evening. A poem received at night should be answered by the next morning. This ability to compose a clever, allusive poem quickly was a sign of a quick-mindedness, sincere interest. A delayed reply could signal a cooling of affection. The historical debate here is about the authorship of these poems, particularly on the women's side. A high-ranking lady would have a retinue of other, well-educated ladies in waiting. When a poem arrived, would she compose the reply herself, or would she consult with her attendants, turning the composition into a collaborative, workshop-like process? The literature of the time suggests that this kind of collaboration was common. A lady might discuss the suitor's poem with her ladies, who would offer their own critiques and suggestions for the reply. This means that when you received a poem from a lady, you were not necessarily hearing a single, individual voice. You were hearing the collective poetic sensibility of her entire court. You were not just courting a woman. You were courting a committee. You read her poem again and again until you have memorized it. You can feel the subtle rhythm of her words, see the elegant dance of her brushstrokes. You have been challenged. She has returned your serve with a shot of breathtaking skill. The game is on, and you must now prepare your reply. A poem that will acknowledge her wit, answer her challenge, and advance the conversation one more crucial step. Her brilliant, challenging poem has thrown you into a state of delicious turmoil. The game has been elevated. You are no longer just a hopeful suitor. You are a participant in a high-stakes poetic duel. The courtship has now become a rally, a back-and-forth exchange of waka that might continue for weeks, even months. This is the heart of the Heian romantic process, a tennis match of the soul, played with 31-syllable shuttlecocks. You must now craft a reply to her reply. This second poem is in some ways more difficult to write than the first. The first poem was a solo performance, a declaration of your own sensibility. But this second poem must be a duet. It must directly engage with the themes and images she introduced in her poem, while also adding a new layer of your own. She playfully suggested that the beauty you saw was a projection of your own heart. You must respond to this. To simply ignore her point and write another poem about how beautiful she is would be clumsy. It would show that you weren't really listening. You need to acknowledge her clever deflection and then, just as cleverly, turn it back to her. You spend another afternoon in deep concentration, brush in hand, surrounded by crumpled-up failures. Finally, you settle on a new verse. You say the flower that blooms within my own heart colors all I see. But it is your light, I think, that makes that lonely flower grow. You read it over. It is, you feel, a worthy response. You have accepted her premise. Yes, there is a flower in my heart. But you have gently refuted her conclusion. The flower is not self-generated. It is grown by her influence, by her light. You have taken her modest compliment and transformed it into an even more elevated compliment to her. You are saying, my poetic soul exists, but you are its son. It is romantic. It is respectful. And it is, you hope, clever enough to impress her. This poetic rally, this chain of call and response, is the primary way that a relationship is built. With each exchange, you learn more about each other. You learn about her favorite poets from the allusions she makes. You learn about her emotional state from the tone of her poems. Is she being playful, melancholic, serious? You learn about the depth of her education from the complexity of her metaphors. You are constructing a detailed psychological and intellectual portrait of a person you have never seen, based entirely on her literary output. A crucial element of this poetic tennis match was the concept of the honkei-dori, or allusive variation. This was the practice of basing a new poem on a well-known, classic poem of the past. A skilled poet could take a famous verse, change a few key words, and in doing so, create an entirely new meaning that was in dialogue with the original. It was a way of showing off your deep knowledge of the poetic canon while also demonstrating your own creative flair. A courtship rally between two skilled poets would be a dazzling display of Hong-Kei-dori, each one trying to top the other with a more clever and obscure allusion. The historical debate around this practice is about its accessibility. Was this intensely literary, allusive form of courtship something that only the absolute top tier of the elite could participate in? Or was it more widespread? Some historians argue that this was a very exclusive game. They contend that the level of literary education required to understand and compose these complex poems was available only to a tiny fraction of the population, even within the court. In this view, the tale of Genji represents a hyper-idealized world, and the courtship of the average, lower-ranking courtier was likely much simpler and more direct. Other historians, however, argue that the Heian court was a hyper-literate society. They suggest that poetry was so central to the culture that a sophisticated understanding of it was more common than we might think. They point to the sheer volume of poetry that survives from this period, written by people from a variety of social ranks, as evidence that this was not just a game for a handful of geniuses, but a fundamental mode of communication for the entire courtly class. You prepare your second letter with the same painstaking care as the first. A new choice of paper, perhaps a pale blue, like the summer sky, a new fold, a new flower, maybe a pink dianthus, a symbol of pure love. You send it off with the same nervous page boy and begin the agonizing process of waiting all over again. A day later, a reply comes. She has answered your poem with another, this one even more clever and touching than the last. The rally continues. With each exchange, the intimacy between you grows. You are not just exchanging pleasantries, you are weaving a shared world together, one poem at a time. You are falling in love not with a body or a face, but with a mind, a sensibility, a way of seeing the world that mirrors and enhances your own. The poetic tennis match continues, volley after volley. Each beautifully folded piece of paper that arrives from her quarters is not just a poem. It's a new piece of the puzzle, a new clue in the slow, thrilling detective story of falling in love. And one of the most important clues you scrutinize with an almost forensic intensity is her calligraphy. In the Heian court, handwriting, the way of the brush, is not a mere technical skill. It is a high art form, as prestigious as painting or poetry. More than that, it is considered the most direct and honest expression of a person's inner character. The way a person wields their brush is believed to reveal everything about their breeding, their education, their personality, and their soul. To judge a person by their calligraphy is not seen as superficial. It is seen as the most profound and accurate form of judgment possible. With each letter she sends, you spend as much time admiring the brushstrokes as you do deciphering the words. Her hand is what the connoisseurs would call a good hand. It has a sense of controlled, graceful power. The lines are not thin and spittery, which would suggest a weak or timid nature, nor are they thick and heavy-handed, which would indicate a coarse or aggressive personality. Her strokes are fluid and confident, with a subtle, rhythmic variation in thickness that is incredibly difficult to master. Her characters seem to dance across the page. You analyze the details. The way she executes along, sweeping strokes suggest a passionate and decisive nature. The perfect, delicate balance she achieves in a complex character shows a disciplined and intelligent mind. The very ink itself seems to have been applied with a special sensitivity, darker in some places, paler in others, giving the writing a sense of life and breath. You are not just reading her poems, you are reading her. This belief that handwriting revealed the inner self was a cornerstone of the Heian aesthetic. A man looking for a wife would often ask to see a sample of a prospective lady's calligraphy before proceeding any further. A clumsy, childish, or unfeminine hand could be an immediate deal-breaker, regardless of the lady's rank or beauty. Conversely, a woman with a beautiful hand could gain a powerful reputation and attract many high-ranking suitors, even if her family was not particularly prominent. A fascinating detail is that men's and women's handwriting styles were expected to be different. Men's calligraphy was often expected to be stronger, more angular, and influenced by classical Chinese models. Women's calligraphy, known as ornate or women's hand, was typically softer, more rounded, and more flowing. It was a cursive, almost abbreviated script that was considered more graceful and emotionally expressive. Your lady's hand is a perfect example of this style, but it has a strength and confidence that you find intoxicating. The academic debate here concerns the science of this graphology. Was there really a direct, objective correlation between a person's handwriting and their character? Modern psychologists would, of course, be highly skeptical. While handwriting analysis is still a popular parlor game, there is no scientific evidence to support the idea that you can reliably deduce a person's personality from their penmanship. So were the high-end courtiers just deluding themselves? Some historians would argue yes. They suggest that the judgment of calligraphy was a highly subjective process, more of a gut feeling than a real analysis. They contend that a courtier who was already predisposed to like a lady would find evidence of her wonderful character in her handwriting, while one who was looking for a reason to reject her would find flaws. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy, a way of justifying a decision that had already been made on other grounds, like her family's political connections. Other historians, however, argue that we should take the Heian belief more seriously, within its own cultural context. They suggest that because calligraphy was taken so seriously, it had become a reliable indicator of certain traits. A person with beautiful handwriting was, by definition, a person who was patient, disciplined, well-educated, and dedicated to the pursuit of beauty, all highly valued traits in their society. A person with sloppy handwriting was, by definition, someone who lacked these qualities. In this view, the calligraphy didn't just reflect a good character. The act of mastering calligraphy built a good character. The medium and the message were inextricably linked. You have carefully saved all her letters. You lay them out in a row on the floor of your chamber, a gallery of her soul. You see the progression, the subtle changes in her script as your correspondences deepen. The first letter was a model of formal perfection, but in the most recent one, you notice a new energy, a slightly faster, more passionate flow to the brushstrokes. It is, you believe, a sign that her feelings for you are growing. The evidence is there, written in plain, beautiful sight. You are not just lovers in poetry. You are lovers in calligraphy. Your poetic correspondence with the lady of the Western Wing has become the central focus of your life. But you are not just courting her. You are also, by necessity, courting her entire household. Her chambers are not empty. She is surrounded by a retinue of attendants and ladies-in-waiting NYOBO. And these women are the formidable gatekeepers of her world. Winning their approval is just as important as winning her own. These ladies-in-waiting are not humble servants. They are well-born, highly educated women themselves, often the daughters of provincial governors or middle-ranking courtiers. They are her companions, her confidants, her secretaries, and her protectors. They are the ones who receive your letters from the page boy, who admire or criticize your choice of paper and flower, who read your poems aloud to their mistress, and who participate in the collaborative process of composing her replies. They are the critics, the audience, and the co-authors of your romance. You know that your every move is being scrutinized by this council of women. They are judging your taste, your wit, your sincerity, and your potential as a future husband for their mistress. To win them over, you must be clever and charming, but also respectful. Your primary contact is the attendant your friend mentioned, the one named Chuzhou. It is she who acts as the main intermediary. When the page boy delivers your letter, he gives it to her. When a reply is ready, she is the one who summons him. But your courtship must extend beyond this one point of contact. You must, in your letters, begin to acknowledge the presence of her attendants. You might add a second, shorter, more light-hearted poem to your letter, addressed to the ladies in waiting themselves. It could be a witty verse, gently teasing them about their role as guardians, or a charming compliment on their own rumored wit and taste. You might even send a small, separate gift, perhaps some rare, high-quality paper or a fan painted by a famous artist, intended for them to share. This is a crucial piece of courtly politics. You are acknowledging their importance and attempting to turn them into your allies. If they approve of you, they can be your greatest asset. They can speak favorably of you to their mistress, praise the elegance of your poetry, and subtly encourage her to reply quickly. They might even drop hints to your own attendants about what kind of flower their mistress is particularly fond of this week, giving you a crucial piece of insider information. But if they disapprove of you, your cause is lost. They can be a formidable wall of opposition. They might lose your letter. They might take an inexplicably long time to deliver it. They might read your poem to their mistress in a flat, mocking tone, pointing out its flaws and highlighting a clumsy turn of phrase. They can poison her against you, portraying you as a bore, a pedant, or, worst of all, a man of pure taste. Her world is a closed society, and you need their permission to enter. A fascinating detail from the literature of the era, particularly the Pillow Book, is the witty, competitive, and sometimes sharp-tongued banter that took place between visiting courtiers and a lady's attendants. A man would have to be on his toes, ready to trade clever insults and witty compliments with a whole roomful of intelligent women, all before he could even begin to address the lady herself, who would, of course, be hidden behind her screen. It was a verbal gauntlet that tested a man's social skills to their absolute limit. The historical debate here concerns the agency of these ladies-in-waiting. Were they truly independent actors, able to influence the course of their mistress's romantic life? Or were they simply extensions of their mistress's will, acting on her unspoken orders? Some historians argue that these women wielded a great deal of real, informal power. In a world where their mistress was confined and isolated, they were her eyes and ears, her connection to the outside world. Their opinions mattered, and a wise suitor ignored them at his peril. Other historians suggest that, while the attendants were certainly influential, their primary loyalty was always to their mistress. They would rarely act directly against her wishes. Their teasing and testing of a suitor were likely a performance, a way of ensuring that he was truly worthy of her. They were not independent agents, but loyal members of a team, all working together to manage the complex and risky business of their mistress's love life. One evening, you receive a reply from the lady, and attached to it is a second, smaller note. It is written on a different color of paper, in a different but equally elegant hand. It is a short, witty poem from Chuja, teasing you about the melancholy tone of your last verse. Does the world seem so gray? It asks, that even the yellow courtier looks blue to you. You smile. It is a test, a playful challenge, but it is also a sign of acceptance. You have been acknowledged. You are no longer just an anonymous suitor. You are a known character in the drama of their chambers. You have passed the first round of auditions with the gatekeepers. Your poetic exchange has been going flawlessly. Each letter is a small masterpiece, each reply a delightful challenge. You have established a rhythm, a delicate rapport. You are beginning to feel confident, perhaps even a little bold. And that is when you make your first, horrifying mistake. It is a subtle shift in the season. The intense, humid heat of high summer is beginning to give way to the first, almost imperceptible hints of autumn. There is a new coolness in the evening air, a different quality to the light. The cicadas, whose shrill drone was the soundtrack of summer, are beginning to fall silent. It is a time of transition, a moment of profound and poetic melancholy. And you, in your loveland distraction, fail to pay adequate attention. You are composing a new poem, your mind still full of the passionate, vibrant imagery of summer. You write a verse about the brilliant crimson of the summer pinks, comparing their color to the flush of emotion you feel when you think of her. It is a passionate, heartfelt poem. You write it out on a vibrant green paper, the color of summer leaves, and, in a burst of romantic fervor, you attach a living crimson pink to the letter. You send it off. proud of its emotional intensity. You have just committed an aesthetic crime of the highest order. An agonizingly long time passes. 2 days. 3. A cold dread begins to creep into your heart. The silence from her chambers is different this time. It is not the polite, considered silence of composition. It is a cold, disapproving silence. Finally, on the 4th day, a reply arrives. The letter itself is a rebuke. It is written on a stiff, formal, grayish-white paper, the color of the late autumn frost. Tied to it is not a flower, but a single, dry, brown maple leaf. Before you even read the poem, your heart sinks. The message is clear. You are a man who is out of touch with the season. You are a man of poor taste. The poem inside is short, cutting, and exquisitely polite. You speak of crimson, but the summer pinks have died. Look at the garden. The only color I see is the sad brown of this leaf. It is a devastating critique. She is not just rejecting your poem. She is rejecting your entire sensibility. She is telling you, in the most elegant way possible, that you are insensitive, unobservant, and clumsy. You have failed the most important test of all, the test of seasonal appropriateness. You have sent a passionate, summery, crimson poem into a world that is now quiet, melancholic, and autumnal. The emotional note you struck was completely wrong. It was like shouting in a library. This obsession with the seasons was not a trivial matter of etiquette. It was the fundamental organizing principle of Heian court life. Everything, clothing, food, poetry, court ceremonies, even the topics of conversation, was dictated by the rhythm of the year. To be out of sync with the season was to be out of sync with the entire cosmos. It was a sign of a dull, unrefined soul. A telling detail is the existence of court calendars that would list not just official events, but also the specific natural phenomena that one should be appreciating at any given time. 5th day of the 4th month, the cuckoo is first heard. 15th day of the 8th month, the full moon is to be viewed. Your life was a series of aesthetic appointments with nature, and you were expected to show up on time. The historical debate here is about the rigidity of this seasonal code. Was it an unbreakable set of rules, as the literature often suggests, or was there room for artistic license? Some historians argue that the rules were absolute. A mistake like yours would have been a genuine social disaster, something that could seriously damage your reputation. They see it as a rigid system of aesthetic control, where any deviation from the norm was punished. Other scholars, however, argue that a true genius could, in fact, break the rules. They suggest that a very skilled poet might have been able to deliberately use an out-of-season reference in a clever, ironic way to make a specific point. But this was a high-risk maneuver, something only a master could pull off. For an average courtier like you, sticking to the rules was the only safe bet. Your mistake was not in breaking the rules, but in doing so out of ignorance rather than artistic intent. You are mortified. The shame is a physical feeling, a hot flush that spreads across your entire body. You have been exposed as a clumsy, second-rate amateur. You have shown yourself to be unworthy. Your beautiful, poetic courtship is in ruins, shattered by your own seasonal blindness. You stare at the dry, brown leaf, a symbol of your dead romance. Is there any way to recover from this? You will have to compose a new poem, a poem of apology, a poem so humble, so self-deprecating, and so perfectly, exquisitely autumnal, that it might just save you from the social abyss. The pressure has never been high. Your apology poem must have been a masterpiece of groveling humility. To your profound relief, after a suitably long and punishing silence, she replied. The tone of her letters is cooler now, more distant, but she has not cut you off completely. You have been demoted from promising suitor to apprentice courtier on probation. The poetic tennis match has resumed, but you are now playing with a distinct disadvantage. You are desperate for some sign, some reassurance that you have not completely lost her favor. And then, one evening, you get it, not in a poem, but in a fleeting, accidental, and utterly electrifying glimpse into her world. You are walking back to your quarters as dusk is falling. The palace is a world of shadows. The interior space is lit only by the soft, warm glow of oil lamps. As you pass the corridors leading to the western pavilion, you notice that one of the paper sliding screens shoji to her chambers is closed. Normally, this would reveal nothing, but tonight, a bright lamp has been placed on the other side of the screen, close to the paper. The thin, translucent high paper of the screen acts like a movie screen, and the figures on the other side are transformed into a drama of living shadows. You see the distinct, elegant silhouette of a woman kneeling, her form defined by the voluminous layers of her robes. She is playing the koto. You can see the shadow of the long instrument before her, the graceful, bird-like movements of her hands as they pluck the strings. You can't hear the music from this distance, but you can see its shadow. You freeze in the corridor, hiding in a pool of darkness between two pillars. This is a shocking, almost illicit, breach of etiquette. You should not be watching, but you cannot tear your eyes away. You see other shadows, smaller and less distinct, moving around her ladies in waiting. One of them is just silhouette, and for a heart-stopping moment, the main shadow, her shadow, is thrown into shock. Clear relief. You can see the perfect, graceful curve of her neck. You can see the outline of her famously long, beautiful hair, which, you can tell even in silhouette, flows all the way down her back to the floor. In an era where a woman's hair was considered her crowning glory, this is a significant and breathtaking detail. You cannot see her features. You cannot see the color of her eyes or the shape of her mouth, but you can see her grace. You can see the poised, elegant way she holds herself. It is an image of pure, disembodied elegance. It is more intimate and more thrilling than seeing a photograph. You are seeing the living, moving essence of her, unmediated by anything but a thin sheet of paper. This act of shadow viewing was a recurring theme in the art and literature of the Heian period. It was a way of seeing without truly seeing, a perfect compromise in a culture obsessed with both romance and concealment. It was a loophole in the rules of invisibility. To look upon a lady's face directly was an unpardonable sin, but to look upon her shadow was a poetic, acceptable, and deeply romantic alternative. A fascinating technical detail about this is the quality of the light. The light from an oil lamp was soft, warm, and flickering. This meant that the shadows it cast were not steady. They would dance and waver, blurring the lines, making the figures seem ethereal and dreamlike. It was a technology that was perfectly suited to the romantic, suggestive aesthetic of the time. The harsh, steady electric light would have ruined the effect completely. The historical debate here concerns the intentionality of such an event. In the tale of Genji, these accidental shadow glimpses happen with suspicious frequency. Were they really accidents, or were they a deliberate, calculated form of communication? Some historians argue that a lady, knowing a suitor might be passing, could have arranged the lamp and the screen in just such a way as to accidentally reveal her silhouette. It was a way for her to send a powerful, non-verbal message of encouragement, a way of rewarding a favored suitor without breaking any of the formal rules of etiquette. It was a flirtation conducted in shadows. Other scholars maintain that we should not be so cynical. They argue that these were likely genuine accidents, the product of the flimsy, translucent architecture of the palace. They contend that the romantic significance of these events was created in the mind of the viewer, the hopeful suitor who was desperate to see any sign as a message. You don't know if she meant for you to see it. You don't care. For a few precious moments, you watch her play. A silent, graceful ghost on a paper screen. The image is seared into your memory. It is a gift, a sign of hope. It tells you that despite your clumsy, autumnal mistake, you are not entirely out of the running. She is not just a collection of poems and sleeves anymore. She is a living, breathing shadow, and you are more in love than ever. The glimpse of her shadow has given you a renewed sense of hope, but it has also introduced a new and terrible anxiety into your life, the ever-present threat of a rival. You are not the only young, bored, and romantically inclined courtier in the palace, and a lady of such obvious taste. Wait, and musical talent is certain to have other admirers. Your beautiful, private, to-person poetry game may, in fact, be a crowded tournament. You start to see potential rivals everywhere. You notice Lord Tadano or I, a man from a more distinguished family than yours, loitering in the corridors near the western wing. Is he there to admire the garden, or is he, like you, hoping to catch a glimpse of a sleeve? You see a page boy you don't recognize slip away from her chambers. Is he carrying a letter from another man? The thought is a jolt of pure, cold jealousy. Your world, which was a quiet stage for your own romantic drama, is now filled with suspicion. Every man is a potential competitor. Every unanswered poem is no longer just a sign of your own failure, but a sign of another's success. Perhaps she is taking a long time to reply to your letter because she is busy composing a more enthusiastic reply to a poem from someone else, someone with a more elegant brushstroke, a more powerful family, and a more clever turn of phrase. This competitive aspect of courtship wasn't accepted, and even celebrated, part of Heian court life. A popular lady would often be juggling correspondence with multiple suitors at once. It was a way for her, and for her family, to assess the field and choose the best possible match. The suitors were, in essence, auditioning for the role of husband, and the competition was fierce. The rivalry was not always a polite, purely poetic affair. While it would rarely, if ever, come to physical blows, that would be an unthinkable act of barbarism in this refined world. The competition could be ruthless. A man might try to intercept a rival's letter. He might start a malicious rumor about a rival's poor taste in robes or his clumsy calligraphy. He might use his family as political influence to have a rival transferred to a dreary, remote provincial post, conveniently removing him from the game. The silent, aesthetic world of the court had a sharp, political edge. A particularly telling detail from the literature is the rainy night conversation in the tale of Genji. A group of young noblemen, including Genji, are stuck indoors on a rainy night, and they pass the time by sharing stories of their romantic conquests and failures, ranking different types of women. This scene reveals the intensely competitive and gamified nature of romance. Women are being categorized and judged, and a man's success with a particularly desirable or difficult woman is a source of immense prestige among his peers. The historical debate here is about the woman's role in this system. Was she a passive prize to be won in a competition between men, or was she an active, powerful player, skillfully managing her various suitors and orchestrating the competition for her own benefit? The traditional, male-centric view of history often portrayed women as pawns in the marital alliances arranged by their fathers. However, the more modern, feminist reading of the sources, particularly the literature written by women themselves, paints a very different picture. It suggests that women were often the ones in control. A skilled lady could use the rivalry between her suitors to her advantage. She could play them off against each other, driving them to greater heights of poetic and aesthetic effort. She could use her power to accept or reject a suitor as a way of influencing her own marital destiny, subtly guiding her father's choice towards the man she herself preferred. In this view, the tournament of love was a game where the prize was also the referee and the chief strategist. You know nothing of these academic debates. You only know the gnawing, corrosive feeling of jealousy. You redouble your efforts. Your poems become more passionate, your choice of flowers more exquisite. You send a small gift to her attendants, hoping to secure their loyalty. You are no longer just trying to express your love. You are trying to win. The quiet, melancholic courtship is taken on a new, desperate edge. You are fighting for her, and the battlefield is a fragile sheet of scented paper. Your only weapon a brush and 31 syllables. The gnawing anxiety of your rivalry with Lord Tadano or I and other unseen competitors is becoming unbearable. Your poetic volleys continue, but you live in a constant state of uncertainty, desperate for some more tangible sign of her favor, some proof that you are the leading candidate. You confide your worries to your closest friend, a fellow courtier who is more worldly and politically savvy than you are. He listens patiently and then suggests a bold and slightly devious plan. You will arrange a calculated accidental encounter. The plan is this. Your friend, through his network of attendants and servants, will find out when the lady is scheduled to leave her quarters to visit a temple or a relative's home. Such excursions are rare and require extensive preparation. On the appointed day, you will position your own ox-drawn carriage on the route you know she will take. The goal is to have your two carriages pass each other at a slow, deliberate pace, giving you the best possible chance of a glimpse. This is not a simple matter of waiting by the side of the road. Your own presentation must be flawless. Your carriage must be in perfect condition. Its bamboo blinds rolled up to just the right height. The ox that pulls it must be well groomed. Your own robes must be a masterpiece of seasonal taste. Even the attendants who walk alongside your carriage must be elegantly attired. This accidental encounter is, in fact, a meticulously staged piece of theater, a rolling advertisement for your own good taste. On the day of the excursion, you are a nervous wreck. You wait in your carriage, the wooden wheels creaking rhythmically. The sides of the carriage are enclosed by bamboo blinds SUDR, allowing you to see out, but making it difficult for others to see in. You peer through the slats, your heart pounding. Then, you see it approaching. Her carriage. It is as elegant and as understated as her poetry. The blinds are down, of course, shielding her completely from view. But you are not looking for her. You are looking for a sign. As the two carriages draw level, moving at a walking pace, you see it. From beneath the blind of her carriage, a fan is slowly extended. It is a beautiful fan, made of painted cypress wood. It is held there for a moment, angled just so, before being slowly withdrawn. It is not a wave. It is a message. The design on the fan, the way it is held, the very fact that it was shown at all, it is a signal, a deliberate act of communication. And then, an even more electrifying sign. As her carriage passes, you catch a fleeting glimpse of the sleeves of her outriders, the ladies in waiting who are riding with her. Their kasani no arome is not just beautiful. It is a color combination that is famously associated with one of your own recent poems. She has dressed her attendants in the colors of your love. It is a public, albeit incredibly subtle, declaration. She is telling the world, or at least the small, observant world of the court, that you are the favored one. This practice of the carriage encounter was a key part of the Heian courtship process. It was one of the few ways to bridge the physical distance between lovers. The street became a theater, and the carriages were the stages. A great deal of social drama was played out in these slow-moving, carefully choreographed encounters. A fascinating detail is that these carriages were often deliberately designed to be uncomfortable and inefficient. They were heavy, cumbersome, and slow, but speed was not the point. The slow pace was essential, as it allowed for the maximum amount of time for observation and the exchange of these subtle, non-verbal cues. The inefficiency of the technology was, in fact, a crucial feature of the social ritual. The historical debate here concerns the audience for these displays. Were these subtle signals, like the showing of a fan or the choice of a sleeve color, really intended for the suitor alone? Or were they also a form of public communication, designed to be seen and interpreted by the entire court? Some historians argue that these were intensely private, coded messages, a secret language between two lovers, but most scholars argue that nothing in the Heian court was truly private. They contend that these encounters were a form of social signaling, a way for a lady and her family to publicly indicate their preference in a way that was deniable if necessary. The gesture was ambiguous enough that it could be dismissed as an accident if the political winds changed, but it was clear enough to be understood by the sophisticated, gossip-hungry audience of the court. It was a way of managing a suitor's reputation, and her own, in a very public way. Your carriage continues on its way, but you barely notice your surroundings. You're floating. The jealousy and anxiety that have plagued you for weeks have vanished, replaced by a feeling of pure, soaring elation. She has seen your devotion, and she has rewarded you with a sign. The fan, the sleeves, It is the closest you have ever come to a public embrace. You know now that the long, patient game of poetry is about to enter its final, and most thrilling, stage. The public signal of the carriage encounter has changed everything. The dynamic of your correspondence shifts. Her poems become warmer, more personal. Less guard. Your own poems grow bolder, more passionate. The long, formal game of aesthetic testing is gradually giving way to a more direct, if still exquisitely polite, expression of feeling. You have proven your worth. You have demonstrated your taste, your sensitivity, and your patience. Now, you wait for the final, most hoped-for invitation of all. It arrives on a night with a full moon. The page boy brings you a letter, and your hands tremble as you take it. It is written on a soft, deep blue paper, the color of the night sky. Tied to it is not a flower, but a single, long blade of grass, bent into a knot. The knot is a classic symbol of a bond, of two things being tied together. The poem inside is the one you have been dreaming of for months. It is short, allusive, and breathtakingly intimate. The lonely moon shines so brightly on my window. If you were to visit, perhaps its light would seem less cold against the paper of my screen. It is an invitation. It is not a direct command. Of course, that would be unthinkable. It is a masterpiece of plausible deniability. She is merely commenting on the coldness of the moonlight. But the meaning is absolutely crystal clear. If you were to visit, she is telling you that if you were to come to her chambers, late at night, you would not be turned away. Your heart feels like it might burst. This is the moment that all your efforts, all your agonizing over poetry and paper, have been leading to. After months of courting a sleeve, a melody, and a shadow, you are finally being granted permission to approach the source. This transition from written correspondence to the first secret, nocturnal visit was the most critical and delicate stage of a Heian courtship. The man was always expected to initiate the visit, but he could only do so after receiving a clear, albeit indirect, signal of encouragement from the lady. To visit without such a signal would be a shocking and unforgivable act of aggression, one that could lead to public humiliation when he was inevitably turned away at her or by her attendants. The lady, in granting this permission, was taking a huge risk. While the courtship up to this point was a semi-public secret, a night visit was a different matter entirely. If it were discovered, her reputation could be seriously damaged. Her decision to grant a visit was a sign of immense trust, both in the suitor's discretion and in her own judgment of his character. A fascinating detail of this process is the role of dreams. In the Heian worldview, dreams were not just random firings of the brain. They were a real form of communication, a space where spirits and lovers could meet. It was common for a poem to mention a dream. The man might write, "I waited for you in my dreams, but you did not come." A gentle rebuke for an unanswered letter. A lady's invitation, like the one you have just received, might have been prompted by her telling her attendants, "I dreamt of him last night." Perhaps it is a sign. Dreams were a way of testing and expressing a spiritual connection before a physical one was possible. The academic debate here is about the level of chaperoning during these first night visits. Was the suitor really left completely alone with the lady? The romantic literature of the time, like the tale of Genji, often depicts these visits as intensely private, clandestine encounters. However, many social historians are skeptical. They argue that it is highly likely that one or more of the lady's most trusted attendants would have been present in the room, perhaps sitting silently in a dark corner. The lady's privacy and, more importantly, her safety would have been paramount. The privacy of the encounter was likely a carefully constructed illusion, a performance of intimacy that was, in reality, being discreetly supervised. The idea of two young, unmarried aristocrats being left completely alone was probably as scandalous to the Heian court as it would have been to the Victorians. You read her poem one more time, the words seeming to shimmer in the lamplight. You have your invitation. The terror and excitement are almost overwhelming. You must now plan your journey. You must wait until the palace has settled into the deep sleep of the night. You must dress in inconspicuous robes. You must move like a ghost through the silent corridors, avoiding the night watchmen and, of course, any rivals who might be lurking in the shadows. Your long, invisible courtship is about to become a secret, nocturnal adventure. The palace at night is a different world. The familiar corridors and pavilions are transformed by darkness into a mysterious and slightly menacing labyrinth. The moonlight filtering through the latticework casts long, strange shadows on the polished floors. The only sounds are the creaking of the wooden building, the distant cry of a night bird, and the frantic pounding of your own heart. Your journey to her chambers has begun. You move with a stealth you did not know you possessed. You have taken off your stiff, formal court robes and are wearing a softer, darker, less conspicuous garment. You have also, crucially, left behind your tall, lacquered court cap, the wearing of which was mandatory during the day. To be seen without your cap was a sign of being in a state of informal intimacy, so to wear it on a nocturnal visit would be a ridiculous and clumsy mistake. You glide through the empty halls, your feet in their soft cloth slippers making no sound. Every shadow seems to hold a potential threat. A flicker of movement in a distant corridor could be a night watchman making his rounds. A cough from a nearby room could be an attendant. Or worse, a rival suitor awakened alert. You are a character in a spy story, your mission one of utmost secrecy and importance. The architecture of the palace, which seemed so open and airy during the day, now works in your favor. The buildings are connected by covered walkways and verandas, allowing you to move from one pavilion to another without having to go out into the brightly moonlit gardens. You are a ghost in the machine of the imperial residence. This secret, nocturnal journey was a trope, a necessary and celebrated part of the Heian romance. It was the physical test that complemented the intellectual and aesthetic tests of the poetic courtship. It required courage, discretion, and a certain amount of daring. A man who was too timid to risk the journey, or too clumsy to carry it out without being discovered, was not a worthy lover. The journey itself was part of the proof of his passion. As you approach the western wing, your senses are on high alert. You move more slowly now, listening intently. Her pavilion is silent. The paper screens are all closed, glowing with a soft, warm, and inviting light from within. You approach the veranda, your heart in your throat. You know you are expected, but the fear of being challenged, of being met by a stern-faced attendant and publicly turned away, is still very real. You make a small, prearranged signal, a soft scratching sound on a wooden pillar, a sound like a small animal. You wait. A moment later, a side panel of one of the screens slides open a few inches, silently. It is Tujo, her chief attendant. She does not speak. She simply gives a slight nod and gestures for you to enter. You slip through the narrow opening into the antechamber of her quarters. The air inside is warm and thick with the scent of her personal incense, the same scent from her letters, but richer and more immersive. You have crossed the threshold. You have entered her world. A curious detail of these nocturnal visits was the problem of getting lost. The imperial palace was a sprawling, confusing complex of near-identical buildings. The literature of the era is filled with comical, and sometimes tragic, stories of suitors who take a wrong turn in the dark and end up at the wrong lady's chambers. This could lead to an embarrassing retreat, or in some cases, a new and unexpected romance. Navigating the palace at night was a real and practical challenge. The academic debate here centers on the secrecy of these visits. How secret were they, really? The romantic literature loves to portray them as thrillingly clandestine affairs, but social historians are more skeptical. They argue that in a place as crowded and as gossip-fueled as the Heian court, a secret visit by a prominent courtier to a prominent lady was likely an open secret. They suggest that the secrecy was more of a performance, a social fiction that everyone tacitly agreed to maintain. The night watchman might have been discreetly bribed to look the other way. The lady's attendants were certainly in on the secret, and the attendants of the suitor would have known exactly where he was. In this view, The journey was not so much about avoiding detection as it was about observing the proper forms of discretion. It was a game of pretending it's a secret, which allowed the affair to proceed without anyone having to officially acknowledge it and thus risk a loss of face if it all went wrong. Zhou leads you silently through the antechamber into the main room. And there, in the center of the room, you see a magnificent, 4-foot-high standing screen. Akicho, its silk panels painted with a delicate sheen of autumn grasses, and with a jolt that is equal parts stare and ecstasy, that on the other side of that thin, fragile barrier of wooden silk, she is waiting for you. Zhou motions for you to kneel a silk cushion on your side of the screen of state. The Kicho. She then bows and retreats silently into the shadows of the antechamber, leaving you alone. The room is lit by a single oil lamp, placed strategically behind another, more distant screen, so that the main space is filled with a dim, soft, indirect light. It is a room of shadows and suggestions. You kneel there, your back straight, your hands resting on your knees. Your heart is a wild drum against your ribs. On the other side of that screen, just a few feet away, is the woman you have spent months dreaming of. You can hear the faint, soft rustle of her silk robes. You can smell her perfume. You are closer to her than you have ever been. Yet you are still separated by this final, crucial barrier. The screen before you is not a solid wall. It is a frame of lacquered wood with panels of thin, gauzy silk, known as AYA, stretched across it. The silk is not quite opaque. In the dim light, you can make out of a blurry shape on the other side. A formless, feminine presence. It is a tantalizing, almost ghostly image. Then, you hear her voice for the first time, not in a song, but in speech. It is a low, quiet voice, a carefully modulated courtly whisper. You have come, she says. It is not a question. It is a simple, elegant statement of fact. The moonlight. You reply, your own voice sounding rough and unfamiliar to your ears, seemed too cold to bear alone. You are speaking in poetry, falling back on the language that has been the foundation of your entire relationship. And so begins your first conversation. It is not a casual chat. It is a formal, highly stylized dialogue. You speak of the beauty of the night, of the sadness of the autumn season, of a line from a classic Chinese poem. You are performing your sensibilities for each other, speaking not as to individuals, but as to connoisseurs of beauty. You cannot see her expressions. She cannot see yours. You are two disembodied voices in the dark, communicating through a veil of silk. All the information you have about each other comes from the words you choose, the tone of your voice, the quickness of your wit, and the depth of your poetic allusions. It is the purest, most cerebral form of a first date imaginable. This practice of the conversation through a screen is the defining feature of the first nocturnal visit. It maintains the visual modesty of the lady while allowing for a new level of verbal intimacy. It was the final test. The poems had proven your taste from a distance. Now, you had to prove your ability to be a witty, charming, and sensitive conversationalist in person. A man who was brilliant on paper but clumsy and dull in conversation could still fail at this final hurdle. A curious detail of this practice is the role of the fan. While you are speaking, you might hear the soft snap of her opening or closing herf, and on her side of the screen. This was not a fidgety, nervous gesture. It was a form of nonverbal communication. A quick, sharp snap could signal amusement or approval of a clever remark you made. A slow, languid wafting of the fan could indicate a more relaxed, receptive mood. You had to learn to read the sounds of the fan, just as you had learned to read her poetry and calligraphy. The historical debate here concerns the authenticity of these conversations. Were two people, speaking in this highly artificial, poetic style, really getting to know each other? Or were they just performing their pre-rehearsed social roles? Some sociolinguists argue that this was a deeply artificial form of communication that prevented any genuine, personal connection. They see it as a script, where both parties knew their lines and the goal was a flawless performance, not a real exchange of ideas or feelings. Other historians, however, argue that for the Heian courtier, this was genuine communication. They contend that the shared language of poetry and aestheticism was the medium through which they explored and expressed their deepest feelings. To them, a clever allusion or a beautifully turned phrase was not a way of hiding their true self, but the most precise and powerful way of revealing it. The formality of the language did not prevent intimacy. It was the very structure that made intimacy possible, by providing a safe and elegant space for two souls to meet. In our passes, the conversation flows, a delicate dance of wit and illusion. You have not fumbled. You have made her laugh, a sound like the tinkling of tiny bells. She has impressed you with her deep knowledge of the classics. The connection you felt through her poems is being confirmed, in real time, by her voice. The vague, blurry shape behind the screen is becoming, in your mind, the most brilliant and desirable woman in the world. The screen between you feels both like an unbearable barrier and a thrillingly intimate space. The conversation continues, a murmuring river of poetry and polite, witty observations. The oil in the lamp is burning low, and the shadows in the room have grown deeper. Then intimacy, strange and profound, has developed between you. Two voices connected in the darkness. You feel an almost unbearable urge to bridge the final physical gap between you. You fall silent for a moment. Then, summoning all your courage, you slowly, tentatively, reach out your hand and place it on the silk panel of the kimono. It is a shockingly bold gesture, a silent question. You are asking for permission to cross from the world of words into the world of touch. You wait, your heart hammering. For a moment, nothing happens. The silence stretches, and you feel a cold wave of panic. Have you misread the signs? Have you been too forward? Have you ruined everything with this clumsy physical gesture? And then, you feel a faint pressure on the other side of the silk. Through the thin, cozy fabric, you feel the warmth of her impressing against your own. She has not pulled away. She has answered your gesture. It is the first time you have ever touched. The sensation is electrifying. A jolt of pure, unmediated connection that is more powerful than any poem. The silk of the screen is a frustrating, tantalizing barrier. You cannot feel the texture of her skin, but you can feel her warmth, the gentle pressure of her presence. It is a disembodied touch, a meeting of two ghosts. Emboldened, you gently slide your hand downwards, towards the bottom edge of the screen. She follows your movement. You reach the lacquered wooden frame at the bottom, and then, with a courage that comes from a place you don't recognize, you slide your hand just underneath it. Your hand is now in her space. It is in the hidden, secret world on her side of the screen. After another heart-stopping pause, you feel her hand, no longer mediated by silk. Meet yours. Her fingers are long and cool. You gently entwine them with your own. This moment of the first touch is a pivotal and recurring scene in Heian romantic literature. It is the climax of the long, non-physical courtship. Very often, the first part of a lady that a suitor would be allowed to touch was not her hand, but the magnificent sleeve of her junihito. A lady might deliberately rest her arm near the edge of the screen, and the suitor would be permitted to take the sumptuous, silken fabric in his hand, a gesture that was seen as both incredibly respectful and deeply intimate. To be allowed to touch her actual hand, as you have been, is a sign of even greater favor. A curious detail that contextualizes as this is the sheer physicality of a court lady's clothing. The junihito could weigh up to 20 kilograms. It was a heavy, architectural garment that created a significant physical barrier around the woman's body. To touch her hand, to find the living person inside that fortress of silk, was a significant and meaningful act of penetration. The historical debate here is about the sexual politics of this moment. Was this a moment of mutual, consensual intimacy, or was it the beginning of a male conquest? A man breaching the final defenses of a woman's protected space. Early, male-centric readings of Heian literature often portrayed the man as the active seducer and the woman as the passive object of his desires. The story was framed as a successful hunt. However, more recent, feminist scholarship has challenged this view. They argue that the woman is very much in control of this entire interaction. She is the one who grants the invitation. She is the one who decides whether to meet his hand with her own. She can end the encounter at any moment by simply withdrawing. In this reading, the first touch is not a conquest. It is a gift, freely given by a woman who is an active and powerful participant in her own courtship. Her modesty and concealment are not signs of weakness. They are the sources of her power and her allure. You kneel there in the semi-darkness, your hand holding hers beneath the screen. You do not speak. The time for words is over. The world has been reduced to this single, silent, and overwhelmingly eloquent point of contact. All the poems, all the letters, all the longing, have led to this one, simple and impossibly profound moment. The screen still hides her face from you, but you feel that you know her more deeply, more truly, than anyone you have ever seen. The night has passed in a dreamlike haze of whispered conversation and the thrilling, illicit touch of a hand in the dark, but the dream must end. The first, faint signs of dawn are beginning to lighten the eastern sky. A cock crows in a distant garden. It is time for you to go. To be discovered in a lady's chambers at sunrise would be a social catastrophe for both of you. It would be a public declaration of a secret, transforming a poetic romance into a sordid scandal. The etiquette of the nocturnal visit is absolute on this point. The man must always leave before he can be seen. This departure is known as the Genji, the parting of the roads, and it is a moment of profound and poetic sadness. You wind your hand from hers. The loss of her touch is a sudden, sharp ache. You rise silently. Her ghost preparing to melt back into the shadows. She does not speak, but you can feel her sorrow in the silence. You slip out of her pavilion as discreetly as you arrived. Your heart a complex mixture of elation and melancholy. The joy of the night is already being tinged by the sadness of the morning. You make your way back to your own quarters as the palace is just beginning to stir. You have successfully navigated the most dangerous part of the courtship, but you are not done. In fact, your most urgent and important duty is just beginning. You must now compose and send the morning after poem. This is not optional. It is the single most important rule in the entire grammar of Heian courtship. Failure to send a morning after poem Meitio no Fumi is not just a minor slip-up. It is a brutal, unforgivable insult. It is a way of saying that the night was meaningless, that the lady was a disappointment, and that you have no intention of ever seeing her again. It would be a public and permanent repudiation, a source of deep shame that could ruin her reputation. The pressure to write this poem, and to get it right, is immense. You cannot afford to be tired. You cannot wait until later in the day. The poem must be written immediately, while the dew is still on the grass, and it must be delivered to her before she has finished her morning toilet. The speed of its delivery is a sign of your sincerity and the depth of your feelings. You sit at your writing desk, your mind still swimming with the memories of the night. The poem must capture the specific mood of the Genji in you, the beautiful sadness of parting. It must speak of your longing to be with her still, of how the world seems empty and colorless now that you have left her. It must be passionate, but also elegant. You choose your paper and flower with even more care than for your first letter. The paper should be a beautiful, rich color, perhaps a deep crimson to symbolize the passion of the night. The flower should be something poignant, something touched with dew. You write, the morning glory has not yet opened its face to the waking world, but already my own heart wilts in the sorrow of dawn. It is a simple, direct expression of your melancholy. You are comparing your own heart to a flower that has not yet had its moment in the sun, a flower that is already fading with the sorrow of your departure. This morning after poem was more than just a thank you note. It was the official continuation of the relationship. It transformed a one-night encounter into the beginning of an ongoing affair. Its arrival was a source of great anxiety for the lady and her attendants. They would wait, their nerves on edge, for the arrival of the messenger. If he was late, or if he did not come at all, it was a disaster. A fascinating detail from the literature is what the lady was expected to do while she waited. She was not supposed to sleep. She was expected to lie awake, watching the dawn, her long hair artfully disheveled, composing her own sad poems of parting. The ideal was a state of mutual, sleepless, poetic longing. The historical debate here concerns the sincerity of these poems. Given the immense social pressure to send one, was it a genuine expression of feeling, or was it a mandatory, formal gesture, a proof of delivery that had little to do with real emotion? Some historians argue that it was often a formality. A man might have a few stock morning after poems ready to go. Then the sending of one was simply him doing the right thing to avoid a social scandal, regardless of how he actually felt about the night. Other scholars, however, argue that for a culture so deeply steeped in poetry, the act of composing the poem was a genuine way of processing and expressing the emotions of the night. The pressure was not just to send a poem, but to send a good one that was specific, original, and heartfelt. The quality of the poem was the true measure of the man's feelings. You attach a dew-covered sprig of an open morning glory to your letter and hand it to your most trusted page boy. "Fly," you whisper. He understands the urgency. He slips out into the misty dawn. Your part is done. Now, you must wait. Once again, her reply to this poem will determine whether there will be a second night. The morning after poem is on its way. A small, dew-covered vessel carrying the entire weight of your future. The elation of the night has completely evaporated, replaced by a new and even more potent form of anxiety. The first visit was a test of your courage and discretion. This exchange of poems is a test of your sincerity. Everything depends on her reply. You wait in your chambers, unable to eat, unable to focus. The rules of this exchange are even stricter than before. Her reply must come quickly. If the day wears on into afternoon with no word from her, it is a very bad sign. It means she is considering her position, or more likely, that you have been found wanting and she is trying to figure out the most polite and indirect way to end the affair. Your mind is a torture chamber of second-guessing. Was your poem good enough? Was the line about your wilting heart too dramatic, too self-pitying? Was the crimson paper too bold? You are completely at her mercy. You have made yourself vulnerable, and now you must wait for the verdict. Meanwhile, in her pavilion, your letter has arrived. It has caused a flurry of control, scholarly excitement. She and her ladies-in-waiting have gathered to analyze it. They admire your choice of the unopened morning glory, a brilliant and poignant touch. They praise your calligraphy, noting the passionate energy in the brushstrokes. They read the poem aloud, dissecting its every syllable, its every allusion. You are being graded by a committee of the most discerning literary critics in the world. The lady herself is, of course, the final judge. If your poem pleases her, if she feels that it accurately and beautifully captures the shared emotion of your parting, she will be moved to reply. If she finds it clumsy, insincere, or cliched, she will be offended. Your poetic failure would be an insult to the memory of the night you shared. This reply from the lady is not just a confirmation of her feelings. It is a crucial piece of social maneuvering, if she wishes the relationship to continue. Her poem must be warm and encouraging. If she wishes to end it, her poem must be cool, fun, and final. But it must be a poem. Do not reply at all. After having allowed a man to visit, would be a strange and confusing breach of etiquette. The affair must be concluded with the same poetic grace with which it was conducted. A fascinating detail is that her poem is often expected to be tied to a piece of the clothing she was wearing during the night. She might take one of the multicolored robes from her Juni Haito, tear a strip from the sleeve, and write her reply on that. This was an incredibly intimate gesture, a way of sending back a piece of the physical experience you shared. To receive a poem written on a fragment of her actual robe was an undeniable sign of her favor. The historical debate here is about the power dynamic of this moment. Who really holds the power in this morning after exchange? The man has the power to initiate the contact, and his failure to do so is a grave insult. But the woman holds the power of response. She has the final say on whether the relationship will continue. Some historians see this as a moment of supreme female agency. In a world where a woman's choices were highly constrained, the power to accept or reject a suitor through the quality of her poetic response was a significant form of her own romantic and social life. Other scholars argue that this power was largely illusory. They contend that a lady's choice was often heavily influenced, or even dictated, by her family. A suitor from a powerful, politically advantageous family would be almost impossible to reject, no matter how clumsy his poetry. Conversely, a brilliant poet from a family with no influence might be gently encouraged by the lady's father to end the correspondence. In this view, the poetic exchange was a beautiful and elaborate fiction, a romantic script that overlaid the hard-headed political and economic realities of marriage alliances. It is almost noon. Your hope is beginning to fade, and then the page boy appears at your screen. In his hands is a single, folded object. It is not on paper. It is a piece of silk, a deep, vibrant violet, the same color as the outermost sleeve she was wearing. The one you first saw beneath the bamboo blind. And on it, in her exquisite, confident hand, is a poem, The Dew on the Grass. You say, is the tear of dawn. Look again, my friend. It is the joy of the world, waiting for the sun's return. It is a perfect, gentle rebuke and a profound acceptance. She has taken your image of sorrow and transformed it into one of joyful anticipation. She is telling you that the dawn is not an end, but a beginning. She is telling you that she is the world, waiting for you, her son, to return. It is the most beautiful yes you could ever imagine. There will be a second night. After the nerve-wracking ordeal of the first night visiting the agonizing wait for her morning after poem, your courtship has entered a new and more confident phase. Your nightly visits to her chambers have become a regular, accepted part of your life. The two of you have spent hours talking to the screen, your voices low whispers in the darkness, sharing stories, dreams, and more poetry. The bond between you, forged in ink and aesthetics, has deepened into a genuine, if still highly constrained, intimacy. And then comes the third night. The third night is the most significant of all, in the complex etiquette of Heian courtship. A relationship that has been consummated for 3 consecutive nights is considered official, binding, and publicly acknowledged. It is the equivalent of an engagement, or even a common law marriage. After the third night, the relationship is no longer a secret. Your visit on this third night is filled with a new sense of weight and purpose. You know that this is the night that changes everything. The conversation through the screen is still a part of the ritual, but it is imbued with a sense of impending permanence. You are no longer just a suitor. You are on the verge of becoming a husband. As before, you must leave her chambers before the sun rises. The secret, stealthy departure is still required, but something is different this time. As you slip away into the pre-dawn gloom, you know that the next time you see her, the screens will finally, permanently, be gone. The morning after poem for the third night is the most important one you will ever write. It must not only speak of your feelings, but also acknowledge the new, official status of your relationship. You labor over it, choosing your words with surgical precision, your calligraphy as flawless as you can make it. Later that day, a formal ceremony takes place, one that you are not present for, but are the subject of. Her family and your family exchange ceremonial gifts, and most importantly, special rice cakes, known as maki, are prepared and sent to your residence from her family. These are the Mikano yo no maki, the third night rice cakes. The arrival of these rice cakes at your door is a public announcement. The servants see them, your friends see them. The news spreads through the palace like wildfire. The rice cakes are a symbol, a declaration that the union is now official. They are a tangible, edible press release. To eat the maki is to formally accept the bond. This ritual of the third night rice cakes is a fascinating blend of the private and the public. The courtship itself was intensely private. a secret conducted in whispers and poems, but its consummation is made public through this highly symbolic, formal gesture. It shows how, in this society, even the most personal matters of the heart were ultimately a matter of social and political alliance. Your love affair is also a merger between two families. A curious detail about these rice cakes is that the specific shape and presentation could vary depending on the region and the specific family as traditions. They were not just plain rice cakes. They were a part of the aesthetic communication, their form as meaningful as their substance. The historical debate here centers on the nature of Heian-era marriage. The system you have just participated in is a form of dual or local marriage, which was common at the time. This means that even after being officially married, the wife would continue to live in her own family's home. The husband would visit her at night but maintain his own residence. Any children from the union would be raised in their mother's household, as part of her clan. This was a system that gave women and their families a great deal of power and autonomy. However, as the Heian period progressed and the warrior class began to gain more power, this system began to change. They knew that a local system, where the wife moves into her husband's home, became more common. This shifted the balance of power significantly, giving the husband and his family more control over the wife and children. The debate among historians is about when and why this shift occurred. Was it a gradual cultural change, or was it a more abrupt shift, driven by the changing political and economic realities of the time? The third night rice cakes represent the high watermark of a system where a woman's family still held a great deal of sway in the marital contract. You receive the beautifully arranged box of maki. You eat one. It is sweet, soft, and slightly sticky. It is the taste of victory, of relief, and of a future that is now intertwined with hers. The long, agonizing, invisible courtship is over. You have won her heart, her hand, and the approval of her family. Now, only one thing remains. The final, and perhaps most terrifying, step of all. You have to actually see her. The third night rice cakes have been eaten. The formal gifts have been exchanged between your families. The rumors have solidified into accepted fact. You are now officially a couple. The long, strange, invisible courtship has reached its logical conclusion. And now, the rule that has governed your entire relationship, the rule of invisibility, is finally, formally, lifted. You are now permitted to see your beloved's face. An appointment is made. It is not for a secret, nocturnal visit. It is for a formal, daylight meeting in her family's pavilion. This is not a date. It is an unveiling. You are more nervous than you have ever been in your life. For months, you have been in love with sleep, a melody, a shadow, a poem, a scent, a voice in the dark. You have constructed a perfect human being in your imagination, a goddess of taste and sensitivity, but you have no idea what she actually looks like. What if her face does not match the perfection of her soul? What if you are disappointed? Or, an even more terrifying thought, what if she is disappointed by you? She, too, has been in love with a disembodied voice and a set of beautifully crafted letters. Now, she will have to look upon your ordinary, imperfect, human face. The pressure of this first look is almost unbearable. You dress with a level of care that borders on insanity. Every layer of your robes, every fold of your sash, every angle of your lacquered cap is subjected to a ruthless self-critique. You arrive at her pavilion and are escorted, not into the dim, intimate chamber of your nightly visits, but into a bright, airy room that opens onto a sunlit garden. And there she is. She is kneeling in the center of the room, her ladies-in-waiting arranged discreetly behind her. There is no screen between you. For the first time, you see her in the clear, honest light of day. She is small, exquisitely dressed in robes that shimmer in the sunlight. Her face is a perfect, white oval, painted with the thick rice powder that is the height of fashion. Her eyebrows, as is the custom, have been shaved off and redrawn as faint, smudgy white thumbprints high on her forehead. Her teeth, when she gives a smile, nervous smile, are uniform, lustrous black. And her hair is even more magnificent than its shadow suggested. It is a river of shining black silk that flows over her shoulders and pools on the floor around her. She is, by the standards of your world, the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. But she is also a stranger. The person you are looking at is a real, physical being, not the ethereal, imagined creature of your poems. Your mind struggles to connect the two, the goddess of your imagination and the small, nervous, black-toothed woman kneeling before you. This moment of the first look kaimami was the ultimate climax and the source of profound anxiety in the Heian romance. All the aesthetic and intellectual compatibility in the world could be shattered in a single, disappointing glance. The literature is filled with stories of lovers who are perfectly matched in spirit but who are, for one reason or another, physically repulsed by each other when they finally meet. A particularly telling detail is that beauty was not necessarily about symmetrical features in the way we might think of it today. A woman's primary physical assets were the beauty of her hair, the elegance of her posture, and the grace of her movements. A lovely face was a bonus, but a woman with magnificent hair and a clumsy posture would be considered less beautiful than a woman with plain features, but an exquisite sense of grace. The historical debate here concerns the shallowness of this final step. Does this obsession with the first look prove that the entire, elaborate courtship was just a prelude to a final, superficial judgment based on physical appearance? Some historians argue that yes, it does. They contend that for all the talk of souls and sensibilities, the Heian system was, in the end, just as focused on the physical as any other. However, a more generous interpretation argues that the first look was not a repudiation of the intellectual courtship, but its final, necessary confirmation. The hope was that the outer beauty would be a perfect reflection of the inner beauty that had already been so painstakingly revealed. It was a belief in a kind of aesthetic unity, where a beautiful soul would naturally inhabit a beautiful, by their standards, body. The anxiety of the first look was the fear that this perfect unity might be broken, that the world might be disharmonious, when the physical and the spiritual did ally, as I have for you. It was a moment of profound, almost cosmic, affirmation. You kneel opposite her. You look at her face, the strange and beautiful face, and she looks at yours. The silence is thick with the weight of 1,000 unwritten poems. You don't know what to say. The familiar, elegant language of courtship seems inadequate for this moment. For the first time, you are not a poet or a suitor. You are just a man, sitting in a room with a woman, at the terrifying, awkward, and beautiful beginning of a new kind of love. You are now a couple. The long, strange, and beautiful game is over. The prize has been won. But as you sit there in the sunlit room, making stilted, polite conversation with the woman whose soul you know but whose face is still new to you, a strange and unsettling thought occurs to you. What do you talk about now? You have already discussed the deepest, most profound things. You have debated the merits of an obscure Chinese poet. You have shared your feelings on the precise, heartbreaking shade of the autumn twilight. You have built an entire relationship on a foundation of exquisite, high-level aesthetic discourse. To now ask, so what are your hobbies? Seems like a shocking and almost vulgar descent into the mundane. The most thrilling part of your relationship, the beautiful, invisible chase, is over. Now begins the much less poetic reality of prose. This is the central truth of the world you live in. You did not fall in love with a person. You fell in love with their taste. Her taste was her soul, her intellect, her character, all made visible. Her choice of sleeve, her busterkers, her scent, the sound of her koto. These were not clues to her personality. They were her personality. You fell in love with an exquisitely curated collection of aesthetic choices. She was not a woman. She was a living, breathing work of art, and her own finest creation. This entire system of courtship was a long, elaborate test of a single quality. Miyabi, this is a core concept of your word, a word that is difficult to translate but means something like courtly refinement, elegance, or the beauty of restraint. To have Miyabi was to have a perfect, intuitive understanding of what was beautiful, what was appropriate, what was tasteful. It was the complete absence of anything rustic, crude, or vulgar. Your entire, months-long courtship was a process of proving to each other that you both possessed this essential quality. Your love was a shared state of Miyabi. Even the games you might now play together are, in fact, further tests of taste. A popular pastime in the court is a game called kai-e-wazi, or shell matching. It is played with a large set of clam shells. The inside of each shell is beautifully painted with a scene, often from a famous poem. The shells are separated, and the goal is to match the pairs. To be good at this game, you need more than just a good memory. You need to be able to recognize hundreds of different poems and artistic styles. Even your leisure is a form of literary criticism. The great, and perhaps unanswerable, historical debate is about the nature of the love this system produced. Did this intense focus on aesthetics and intellect lead to a deeper, more profound form of connection than one based on mere physical attraction? Or did it create a fragile, brittle love that could not survive contact with the messy realities of life? One school of thought argues that the Heian system fostered a true meeting of minds. By forcing lovers to know each other's intellect and sensibility first, it created bonds of deep and lasting compatibility. It was a system that valued the things that endure, wit, intelligence, and a shared way of seeing the world over the fleeting beauty of a face. In this view, the love of a Heian courtier was a purer, more spiritual connection. The more cynical perspective, however, argues that a love based entirely on a shared appreciation for beautiful things is a love that is ill-equipped to handle the ugly parts of life. What happens when your brilliant poets get sick? What happens when political fortunes change and you can no longer afford the most expensive paper and incense? What happens when you simply run out of clever things to say about the moon? This view suggests that the Heian romance was a beautiful but unsustainable fantasy, a love affair with an idea rather than a person, destined to fade into a quiet, melancholy disappointment once the poetry stopped and the ordinary business of living began. You look at the woman across from you. She is real. She is no longer just a beautiful idea. The long, thrilling game of courtship is over. Now, a new, quieter, and far more mysterious game begins. The game of trying to make a life together. The aesthetic perfection of the chase has given way to the beautiful, awkward, and deeply human imperfection of the capture. You have won the most exquisite prize imaginable, and you have no idea what to do with it. And so, our story of the invisible courtship fades to a close. Like the final, lingering note of a koto string, the bright, revealing light of the afternoon softens, and the palace begins to wrap itself in the long, cool shadows of evening. The paper screens, which once seemed like barriers, now glow with the warm, gentle light of the lamps within, turning the solid world into a dream of itself. The scent of evening incense begins to drift through the quiet corridors, the calming, timeless perfume that speaks of a day's end. The world is letting go of its sharp edges, of its anxieties and its tests. The need to be clever, to be perfect, to be seen in just the right way, is dissolving into the quiet humility of the coming night. Your own breathing deepens now, finding a slow, easy rhythm, a gentle tide pulling you away from the shore of wakefulness. Feel the last of the day's thoughts drift away, like single blossoms falling from a branch in a quiet garden. The intricate rolls, the whispered poems, the rustle of silk, they are all becoming part of a story that is now gentle and distant. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to prove. You are floating now, in the quiet, peaceful space where stories end and dreams begin. Let the silence of the old palace become your own. Let the soft, filtered light of the paper lanterns illuminate your path to a deep and tranquil rest. The game is over. The poetry is complete. Sleep now.